Welcome, doctors and team members. I'm Dr. Ataii, and today we're going to talk about learning from our mistakes. And it's Shofu's learning objective in these webinar series to help you avoid making mistakes by learning from the mistakes made by others, including yours truly. I will show you restorative cases that have been seen over my career that could have been done better if they were restored using either different techniques or different products. I hope that what you learned today in this webinar will help you prevent and what I've seen in my past 27 years of a learning curve or making these similar mistakes. So once again, welcome. There's a few of you online already, and those of you who are interested in understanding and learning about today's CE, where you're going to learn about the treatment planning of what I like to call learning from our mistakes when it comes to restorative and techniques that I had to not just inherit from dental school, but also update when it comes to composite types of resins, direct restorations. And again, there's time and place for every part of dentistry. And today we're going to talk a lot about what I do every day in my practice. And if we are able to kind of share our processes of why sometimes these composite fillings fail. Is it part of the treatment planning? Is it because it's the wrong treatment? Could it have been that it should have been a 3/4 crown, an inlay, an onlay? And what types of materials would be ideal for what I like to say the long-term restorative success when it comes to direct restorations? We're going to learn a lot about case presentations for patients accepting and using digital photography, as well as finishing, polishing, and really ideal delivery. Because when we start to talk and going back to the materials options, you're going to learn something new, what's called gymer. When it comes to talking about finishing and polishing, we want to talk about those margins and then the actual processes of patients accepting these. So we're going to kind of walk through a workflow in your practice of from diagnostics to delivery today. So once again, I'm Dr. Ataii, and those of you who've heard me speak before, you might have seen me on stage talking about clear aligners prior to pandemic. Now a lot of webinars talking about multiple assets of filling, restorations. I was one of the ones that was really found the niche in doing laser treatments. But back in the early 90s, as you recall, that was more of a marketing tool where now it's kind of become part of our potential gum treatments. But really you can't drill and fill with the laser. So you're still back to figuring out those direct restorative treatment plans and how we go about it. So again, I've have the pleasure of kind of giving you this next hour, the conversations of a little bit about what I do every day in my practice. As you see, wonderfully, I'm in Laguna Hills, California. Nice weather today. We just found out that we're supposed to be wearing masks again back in LA and it's coming over to Orange County. So I made sure I threw the masks on the myself and the family for you on the slides. We all are vaccinated, but we still want to be safe. Anyway, to that note, I figured I'd make a little light of today what's going on. So what do we do every day as general practitioners? And what happened is I started talking about a case for my son. My son had a little slip and fall and literally broke the incisal third of his central incisor of his adult tooth. You know, at that time, you know, when you're a parent, you're concerned, pulpectomy, what do we do? Is it going to get traumatized? And it was significant chip big enough where it went to the gingival third. And I was worried as he had his deciduous posterior teeth still in, what is going to be a long-term restorative treatment. So I kind of wrote about it, talked about what I used. And then all of a sudden, a lot of conversation came about, well, how did you do it? And in the August issue that you're going to see coming out, we're going to talk a lot about on the actual treatment that I gave and some key points. And we're going to talk about today the actual material I used, including what I talk about, the gymer technology that it's somewhat new to some of you who haven't heard it before. But I always like to talk about DTR. So what we do every day as general practitioners, I say as diagnosis, treat, and repeat. We have to diagnose, treat with the proper materials as best as we can. And we do that again, new patients. And this is how we kind of go through every day. So the type of restorative, the size, the material is important. When you start to come to ideal dentistry or asking what is the timeline where something lasts, or how long is it taking to actually deliver this ideal restorative when it comes to direct restorative treatments. And then tell me about margins. Tell me about finishing. Tell me about polishing. Is it going to be consistent every time, or am I going to get some shrinkage? Am I going to get leakage? Am I going to have a problem with secondary decay? And when you start to look at that, we have to balance the patient's fees and the office expenses as well as standard of care. And that's the dentistry delicate balance that I talk about. You know, we live in where we have to deliver standard of care and at the same time remain profitable. This balance is something that we always have to talk about. So it's important for you to know your materials and understand a little bit of what happens and know the history. Then we can kind of decide what materials can be used. So let's just dive into a little bit of some research that I did for all of you in talking about just the direct restorative dental data. So just some basic data, and some of these I didn't even know myself when I was doing the research on it. I thought it was interesting to kind of share with you that more than 90% of adults and approximately 20% of the people of all age groups in the United States have more than 1/3 that's of all age groups will have experienced tooth decay. So what does that tell you? That tooth decay, it's true that it may not be on the rise, but we still have a lot of untreated decay out there. Dental composites then are now being used for direct restorations for over 95% of all anterior and 50% of all posterior teeth. Now I say 50% because sometimes we're doing inlays, onlays. I'm talking direct restorations, right? So back in the 27 years ago when I graduated dental school, we still did silver fillings, we still did gold, we still did, I mean, I came from a gold foil day, and I still have patients to this day who have the gold foil without decay on their buccal margins or the class 5s, but obviously we can't do that anymore. So it's good to know that restorative dentistry, it actually costs $46 billion in United States annually. That is the actual number that I pulled from data that just literally dumbfounded me of the failure rate that has 11% of dental composites on the posterior and anterior teeth. So 11% of the cases are failing. I think that's high. You know, and again, this data that I pulled was from 2017. So it could be a little higher, but the reality is it's not acceptable in my practice. And why are they failing? So a couple of reasons why they fail. So first and foremost, you get increased plaque and biofilm formation right away when you're replacing that material of direct composite material. So you're going to see that according to in vitro studies and in vivo assessments, dental resin composite materials form more plaque, biofilm on their surfaces compared with other types of dental restorative materials. So when you start to look at, you know, the standard of gold being ideal, definitely that has less plaque buildup, but composites have more plaque buildup and biofilm. And you can kind of see on the slide on the right that you can see where the plaque builds up right within 24 hours. Of course, you know, within 24 hours, patients haven't quite brushed yet. Maybe they haven't flossed yet, but bottom line is that plaque buildup happens, the biofilm happens within 24 hours. And that's a big problem, especially when I go back to my son, who, you know, I have a 10-year-old son who chips his front tooth or breaks it, actually, the 2/3 of it being missing. It's a concern for me. So I'm always on him. Are you brushing? Are you flossing? So is there a material that actually gets better with brushing? Is there a material that actually is able not to have as much biofilm or plaque buildup? And that's what we're going to discuss today. Most importantly, secondary caries, right? Gram-positive bacteria present in the human oral environment, as we know, including Streptococcus mutans and all these different lactobacilli are the main constituent in bacterial species of human dental plaque, right? So when you start to see that the surfaces of dental composites that are not smooth, and over time, it actually intensifies the degree of bacterial colonization. So you're talking about how smooth can we make it? I take my white stone, I brush and floss and brush and floss, and I tell the patients to really buy that Sonicare too. But at the end of the day, if the material themselves, the silica nanoclusters, are not a particular size, you're going to get increased surface roughness, which creates what? That plaque formation in the secondary cavity. So when you start to look at, when we start to talk about restorative material, do we have a bioactive restorative material? Are we in a position to have composites that actually are going to act like dental enamel, if you will, where they repel potential plaque or buildup? And by the word bioactive restorative material, I want to tell you exactly what I mean. So they remineralize and strengthens tooth structure through fluoride release and maybe the release of other minerals that'll actually help that composite last longer and be just like the enamel on a patient's tooth. Forms an apatite-like material in its surface when immersed in fluids over time. So as you know, the fluids break down the composites, break down the cements, break down the bonding agent, and we want it to regenerate. So basically we want that live tissue to promote vitality in the tooth. So that's what we mean by bioactive. And why it's important is because we want it to act like a tooth, right? So some examples of some bioactive and non-bioactive, for instance, I have on the slide here, where non-bioactive would be amalgams. Some composite resins are non-bioactive. Glass ionomers, bioactive, and they remineralize, right? So we have Ionomers, and I'm going to go deep into the what Ionomers are, so you understand that these are really helping where they regenerate the material, the composite material, so it doesn't break down or degrade during time in saliva or in liquids or in water. So multiple companies you can see on the right side that's been listed. But in my world, I'm going to focus on a little bit more on Ionomers because that is something that I see that has the product that has the glass ionomer and all the benefits that you see in the, I guess I can say the hard composite as well as the injectable, a little bit softer composite. We wanted to have these bioactive restorative materials within them. Fluoride, I know a lot of patients worry and they Google, and those of you who have ran into this, they oh my God, I don't want fluoride. Fluoride's bad. Well, we're not putting pure fluoride, right? So an ideal composite would have that recharge where they release the fluoride and it actually contains within the composite material. Because a lot of composite materials, after 24 hours, just release the fluoride and that's it. But does it regenerate? Does it rehydrate? Does that material actually, composite material, come back and rehydrate itself where it doesn't get degraded with the shrinkage? And that's important. So a lot of composites may have fluoride, but they release, but are they recharging? And by the word recharging, what I'm saying is basically when you look at these types of materials, we're looking at that fluoride to be released and it consistently rehydrates and gets again strong again. I'll go a little deeper into that because the ideal direct composite restoration for me would be one that I can use where it's easy. I can maybe either injectable composite, a hard packable composite. But, when I talked, and Dr. Griffin is a good friend of mine, I talked to him and says, what are some of the products you use? And when he started talking to me about, I use flowables, I was like, flowables are horrible. They're they just break off. He goes, yeah, but these are injectable composites and they're labeled as flowables, but they have nano hybrid direct composite resins. And that's when I started to look deeper and under the hood, if you will, of what's a nano hybrid and what is an actual flowable. So what you need to understand is that when we're talking about these crystal or the packaging of these products, whether you're a class 1, and I'm going to go into a little bit of diagnosis of class 2, class 3 fillings, just to get an idea of when we see these kind of yellow stainings or shrinkage on the composite, these yellow stainings are typically from what? They're from the failed restorations of not having the fluoride consistent recharge and release and kind of letting that shrinkage happen. And all the other processes that I talked about in that not having potential Ionomer within the product. And instead, it does what? After 3 to 7 years, you start to see these problems and breakage. So when we are looking at these patients, and specifically I'm talking about an incisal third, let's go through just diagnosing just a basic, incisal, or what happened to my son, breaking 2/3 of teeth. Our options are somewhat limited because if the patient says, I don't want to do a veneer, which I didn't want to do a veneer on my son, and he's young and I want to just do a direct restoration, what do I have? Because I don't want to replace it every few years. And that Ionomer technology is something that's important that I'm going to talk to you about, because when you start to see these final finishes, how long are they going to last? How long are these final finishes going to last? Because color and different options of having the restoration match the enamel, great. But when you start to look, and I did this filling for this gentleman on tooth number 29, and the patient I did 29, 30, and 31 on him, 29 being a different material, and the 30 and 31 did not have Ionomer in there. We ended up kind of getting that patient thinking he's going to come back every 6 months. And unfortunately, he moved out of town. And when he came back, he had 2 root canals done on 30 and 31. And 29, as you can see, started to have a little bit of shrinkage. But the reality is that this particular patient, I redid it, used the Ionomer material. And I said, what happened to 30 and 31? Why are they root canaled? And he said, I was getting so sensitive that the doctor said, well, we can just reduce the sensitivity by just getting rid of the nerve. I said, really? That's why. So post-op sensitivity is a big factor when you start to look at these treatments, because when we are drilling or into proximal caries, their main goal, as we all remember, is trying to get to the pulpar tissue. So if you don't have the strength, the regeneration, the rehydration, and any kind of fluoride releasing, those key factors, we're going to have that post-op sensitivity. So I felt horrible that the patient had 2 root canals done, but the patient's like, well, it took 7, they hadn't come and seen me for about 7 years. It lasted for 7 years, but that's not what I want to do. When I look at these class 5s or cervical abfracted areas, and I want to talk to the patient that, yes, it's true that they may be maloccluded or they may be needing some sort of guard, but under the gum line, I need to get something that's not going to shrink and have these problems. As you know, it's sitting in not just the saliva, but now you're talking about all the progesterone, everything that's in the gum tissue and the sulcular fluid that's there, especially on a patient that potentially may be getting pregnant, or, we start to have some of these issues that I need to make sure that when I'm treating them, I'm using a material that's not just shade that's important, but all the other factors. So we're going to get into a little bit deeper about the products. I'll be talking to you about the Ionomer technology, or this Fit SA that I use for the injectable composite for gum tissue. If there's no real tissue involvement, we're going to talk about these 8 and 7 generation, where you just simply sandblast the area. You can etch the area. And once you etch the area, you wash out, you can simply put on the composite material, the injectable composite that has the Ionomer technology in it, and put a thin layer and just cure that thin layer. I'm talking about maximum 0.5 millimeter. And now you can go back and put another layer of the injectable composite material. Again, I'm using Fit SA for that, and finalize it without having that bonding. Why not the bonding? Sometimes the bonding, as you see, some of these patients might have bleeding gums, or potentially under the gum line, that I have a lot of geriatric sometimes patients. So it allows me to be a little bit more nimble in giving these cervical decays new life, rather than my gold foil that I used to do. So let's get into the materials and the conversations we had. So what is actual Ionomer? An ideal restorative property, like for me, I want to have one that I mentioned earlier that has fluoride releasing or recharge, acid neutralization, right? We don't want it to break down during like acidity. If the patient's having chips and salsa, one thing, but if they're sucking on lemons, another thing. But we just basic acidity in the saliva. We want to have not just flexural strength, but rather compressive strength. And we want to make sure it doesn't shrink, right? The polymerization or shrinkage value to be low. Obviously, having a color stability. When I say color stability, I want that A1 shade that I pick to be A1 shade 5-10 years down the line. I don't want it that A1 shade to start to degrade and you start to see the opaque kind of layer of that staining that you sometimes see on the bonding agents. And obviously radio opacity. So these are, in my world, the ideal restorative properties to have. So what is Ionomer technology? So Ionomers can be either self-etching primer and restorative material, or they can simply be within the composite resin that are going to have this nano hybrid crystals within it. So when you start to look, and I have multiple research on this, that Ionomer technology has been around for over 10 years. What's been great is that we've now seen that Shofu has kind of capitalized in making that into their material to avoid the shrinkage, the the bonding, all the fast setting, the fluoride release. So glass ionomers are easy to place, right? Glass ionomers are fast setting, high in fluoride release, low in polymerization and shrinkage, hydrophilic capacities, and bonding abilities on enamel and dentin. That's great. They're obviously, it can be light activated glass ionomers. In particular, you have added benefits in reduction of microlesion, or you can actually finish and polish. Again, something I learned from Dr. Graham. They're the new type of restorative material that demonstrates the same characteristics of glass ionomers, having this Ionomer type containing restoration. But most importantly, they're aesthetic, right? So glass ionomers are not as aesthetic. Right? They're not, you can't use them for that, for my son, for that class 3 in anterior. So then they polish really well. So let's go a little deeper about what Ionomers are. First, I need to explain to you what's out in the market. So when you start to talk about strength and how strong can the composite really be before it fractures, most of the composites in the market are done pretty good. I mean, as you can see from Beautifil, which is Shofu's, to Tetric, Venus, Herculite. I mean, I try to name as many of them that are popular within dentistry. They're all pretty strong. Filtech Supreme from 3M as well. They all have anywhere from 270 to 300 megapixels, which is very, very strong, right? Now you start to get that flexural strength. Now that is basically on tensile movement, the lateral movements, and you start to see that real breakdown starts to happen during that lateral type movements. So compressive strength and flexural strength of the nano composites have been shown to be equivalent, if not higher, than those of the hybrid hybrid composites. What does that mean? Well, the nano composites is what the Ionomer technology has. So we have that Beautifil, and some of the other ones may not have that Ionomer technology in there. So for me, the strength, compressive strength I get, but it's that lateral movements as well as the shrinkage. So again, you start to see you want the lowest shrinkage. And in the market right now, and I kind of try to put from, again, named, you can see from Filtech, different brands of it, all the way to Ionomers. A lot of these different materials, including the Herculite, they have some shrinkage that's not so ideal. I want the least amount of shrinkage, and that's what Ionomers do. They have the polymerization shrinkage that's very, very low and limited. Most importantly, the color stability. So when you start to look at the actual color, when I put, like I said, the A1 shade, understand that the center of the actual, so if you take a composite and just, put it on a white sheet and just light cure it, you start to see that the periphery and the center may be different. In time, you start to see periphery be lighter than the actual center core of the actual composite. So the center before and the peripheral after cure is important. And that's where we start to see where a lot of doctors have to mix and match or add, enamel shades or add different shades to a process where it may take a little too long. And the particle diameters in those hybrid composites, they have to be very, very small, the nano fillers, that way I can polish them nicely, right? So again, I put this up. Some of this you may know already, but when we talk about that bioactive material of choice, having that Ionomer technology where it releases and rehydrates with fluoride, it's important because after the first 24 hours, if the fluoride goes, then what happens? Does everything else start to degrade? The answer is, yeah. I mean, we want to make sure that that fluoride is happening throughout the course and life of the restorative material. Hence that word bioactive. It's constantly working for us to get recharged and fluoride and released and recharged. Now, when it comes to this direct composite restorations, when I have a patient who's had tetracycline staining, I've tried my best to whiten them and they've kind of given up and they say, can I get a veneer? I'm like, these are good enamel. I don't want to shave it. Maybe we can just put a layer and just brush on. Well, the beauty of these types of Ionomer type brush technique is what we can actually put on by simply etching, isolating, and just brushing on these Ionomer materials. And I use Beautifil again. Shofu has been kind enough to open my eyes of how easily it is to just brush on and cure, that I can get this done in short amount of time, less than an hour. I can get 12 teeth done, and the patient's going to be excited. And I just polish it with the different polishing discs that they have. And it's great to have that option for a patient. As a matter of fact, let me show you this case when the patient came in. Her concern was obviously, as you can see, specifically the tetracycline staining. She had a history of braces, and they took out the brackets and the part of her enamel went. So as you can see, she has dentin exposure, and the patient was never really hypersensitive, but she just didn't like that yellow. And she's like, I've been bleaching and only the sides get white. True, that's what happens when you start to see that the dentin is exposed, or the thin enamel layer is all you have on her upper and lower arch. So we decided to start with the upper arch, simply isolate with some clear strips. And I know some of you like to put the rubber dam or potentially some isolite. In this case, this is just being done during her lunch hour. She has to get back to work. So we simply etched, put the little clear strips in between. I used the Beauty Bond that has the liquid bonding, again, having the Ionomer technology, bond it, light, air. I used the 0.5. It was a white enough shade that she wanted it really, really white. I mean, this is what she was aiming for. And so we kind of brushed it on, and we polished with the polishing super snap and snap that Shofu provides. And they even have a pink color gum. So we even were able to put some pink there. You can see under the gum line, I kind of was able to put some pink color. So it looks all nice, and her smile line has a final finish that looks enough where she's happy, where I don't have to shave the teeth and give her a veneer. Again, chairside direct restorative. As she starts to brush her teeth, you actually get more of a self-shining, more of a luster, and it doesn't become where you kind of see the teeth kind of get that staining. And even 1 week post-op, again, I hadn't done the back or the lower teeth, and she wanted now to move forward the lower teeth. And, I can now rest assured that I'm not going to have all that plaque buildup, and instead I'll have it repel and help the patient long-term, at least without having to shave the teeth down to a nub. Now, you can use this for class 2 as well. So for me, I use that fit essay sometimes for a deep class 2. If it's close to a pulpal chamber, I can actually use it because I don't need their self-adhesive on the fit essay. We're going to go into a little bit details of what self-adhesive materials are, but I can actually use that as a liner without etching and bonding. It's the 0.5 millimeter thickness, light cure. And now I can add my bonding agent right over the etch and bond. And then I can at that point add my composite filling material, which you could use injectable composite or packable composite. But in this particular case, I use the Beautifil to fill in while the Ionomer is within the both restorative, and the fit essay that I mentioned is as my liner. So let's go a little deeper in what I mean by self-adhesive composites. So a little history on actual filling, white filling. When I first started, I think we were around Gen 3 is when I first started. So as you recall, we have to etch, we have to kind of condition. At that time, we had to condition the dentin and enamel. We had to remove that smear layer. You had that hybrid layer in between, and you didn't want to do a dry bond, but rather sometimes you want to have the moist bond. Other times they're like, no. The first 3 generations was a dry. So there was 2 bottles at one point. We were mixing 2 different bottles and multi-steps of, and there was some post-op sensitivity. And the megapixels of bonding started at 1 to 3, where now we start to see, as we're now in Gen 7, we're doing really well with the megapixels, 25 to 30 bonding. No real post-op sensitivity that I've seen. There's usually 1 bottle technique now, or sometimes they have these little snaps where you press the little snap and it self-liquid mixes together. And you don't whether, I mean, you want to dry it ideally, but it doesn't have to be desiccated. And you don't have to necessarily etch or condition some of these. I would like to say Gen 7 or Gen 8. So depending on what you are utilizing in your practice, when I'm using the Ionomer type material, or when I use some of the Shofu products, I don't have to etch all the time, because they have that I don't have to bond all the time. They have the self-bonding within it. Yes, of course, on enamel, you're going to always etch. On dentin, I don't always have to etch, sometimes on the outside. So when it gets to these different types of generations, I like to kind of say, look, I think the future of composite resins are going to be where we drill. And just like how we used to pack amalgam, we simply just start packing in the composite. But we're not there yet. We still have to do some etching. We still have to do some bonding. But it's good that we see that these bonding agents and some of the composite agents that are actually self-bonding. So if you look at a case where I'm on my wish list of having Gen 8, which is where we're saying potentially that's where this Ionomer technology and the fit assays landing, is that I don't need to really etch or really condition the tooth, because it's actually bonding. Now, if you're bonding to enamel, again, you have to etch, but if it's going on dentin, I can simply just put it and use it maybe as a liner, or use it for a class 5 on a patient who's, a little bit elderly or has got some sulcular fluid, and we etch it, now it starts to bleed. So some of these areas, we may not have to etch on dentin, or maybe sometimes it'll just hold on enamel because they have that self bond within it. But it kind of gives you an idea that as far as the bonding agent, you're talking 25 plus megapixels. That's really good of sticking to a tooth. So you can use it as a liner, you can use it as a base, you can use it as a class 5 on some of the, or maybe even use it as potentially a sealant for kids. So in this particular case, when the patient came in, I had used a different composite resin, and 5 years plus later, the patient came in, I think it's just under 5 years actually, patient came in where you saw the shrinkage happening on tooth number 5, right next to my bridge. And that particular case was sensitive. The patient came in because the tooth was sensitive. So we replaced it, and we, kind of isolated, put in a little bit of a base layer of the Ionomer, which was the fit SA. We didn't etch and bond that. We just simply put that on the base floor. And then once we cured it, we then at that point etched and bond and did the injectable composite, where you can see the margin looks nice, as well as the lower arch needed composite filling as well. And that one we didn't have to put any fit SA, but rather didn't need a liner, but instead we just simply filled it in. So tooth number 5 and 29 got the treatment done where the patient, my endodontist was saying, hey, you may need to do a root canal on this tooth. So find good enough material, I can at least, the cavity wasn't to the pulp, I can at least save it. Even if it's close enough, I can still save it. So I use these consistently for kids or for PRRs, for long-term durability, for potential, composites, or using them for sealants. So for me, having tools that don't need the etch and bond and they have self-containing etch and bond really helps. And that's what this Fit SA does for us. The benefits of this potential 8th generation, I like to call it, is that it's all in one, right? It eliminates that bonding layer. So many who favor the bioactive materials believe in this, that it creates a barrier that inhibits those free ion exchanges and its helpful effects. And again, it's bioactive, and more importantly, that we can actually put this layer in without having that stain line on the margins that you see that typically happens with the bonding layer. So no bonding layer, no stain lines, right? So for the patients, again, that have that class 5, or potentially some of the unique structures that this filler combines, is that we are able to just light cure right on dentin, as well as the enamel, to blend in the surrounding dentition, right? So it's good to have an option in my practice. So I call this the 8th generation of self-adhesive composites. But really, it's ideal for those class 1s, non-load bearing, especially on kids. They move around too much. The etch tastes horrible. Those class 3 and potential class 4 restorations that are, on maybe some elderly, geriatric, some patients that's, again, can't have that chair time and want a quick turnaround. And class 5, the cervical caries and root caries, those wedge-shaped defects, we can use them as liners for large restorations, and again, ideal for PRR. And, it's very simple. So the directions in using these, you have to spread, obviously you dry the tooth, the dentinal layer, you spread evenly within the cavity preparation, just a 0.5 millimeter. You don't want to overdo too much. 0.5 millimeter. You, at that point, let it sit for 10 to 20 seconds. That's important because it's now going into the dentinal tubules and locking itself in. You now light cure about 5 seconds. Then you go in and fill the additional layers with the Fit SA. And you want to do less than 2 millimeter thickness at a time. And at that point, you're going to cure the 10-second cure. And if you want, you have room, like I said, use that as a liner, no problem. You can now put other composite restorations on top of your liner if you're using it as that, or you just simply leave it as a class 5 teeth as a finish. So that kind of gives you an idea of some of these different types of class 5 and self-adhesives. And the reason I like to show you this is that there's really no bottle, no etch, no real hard techniques, but other than what you saw earlier, just spread the half thickness, you light cure 5 seconds, go back and do the rest, and you're done. So that dentin and Fit SA layer lock themselves, and they have an invisible margin, if you will, and that really, really helps these patients kind of get a much ideal look. And again, for the kids on non-load bare loading, it helps to help these patients who are kind of moving around a little bit. And it's not a deep decay. Sometimes I have some grooves that I have to remove, and some of those fissures that are deep, I can now use this Fit SA for that type of cases as well, as you see on the slide. So let's go a little deeper in that class 5. You saw that class 5 restoration that we put this Fit SA on. There's really no gum involvement, just simply air dry and half layer light cure and additional layer. These patients are a lot happier patients when you start to see them, and it lasts. Believe me, doctors, it does last. You might be surprised, saying, wait a minute, are you kidding me? Is it going to pop off? No, it doesn't. I've done this for now going my 3rd year utilizing this, and I haven't had a single patient come back of it popping off or being post-op sensitive. So when you start to look at the biocompatibility, when you start to look at the Ionomer technology, this particular patient had multiple restorations done, multiple chairside veneers done, and you can see that the treatment planning is important, but this is where now that Beautifil comes in. And the Beautifil now is a different line of product that has the composite that I can actually use to quickly give them aesthetic look, or a packable composite to get this posterior class 2. But I need to document the case. I need to maybe potentially take a good photo so they can see it before and after. The zoom effect, the selfie effect, that's important. So, I like to have something real quick that I can show to the patient. And I've been talking about this for a very long time, to give you a good before and after result, to show the patient of what they look like right away. You need a good camera. You need a really good camera, and your iPhone isn't going to do it. Your intraoral camera isn't going to do it. And we're going to want to have something that some of you have heard me during the clear aligner lectures that, documentation is important. Patients tend to forget what they look like after you've fixed them up. And yes, this is the same exact patient that you can see the silver filling on the buccal surfaces of the first molars of 19 and 30. This is still there. There's the silver fillings, and all of the chair side just brushed on Beautifil composite chairside veneers are done. Simple, by having the patient be so excited by taking a camera and shooting it, and not be so heavy, not be where my team is trying to fumble of what the settings are. I need a preset shooting module. I need a large LCD screen, lightweight. We're talking less than 2 pounds. So the iSpecial camera is something that I use. Again, I really endorse this camera. You're spending a couple of grand on a camera and you're like, oh my God, it's so much. But I've seen some ortho practices, I've seen some dental practices. They have a special room dedicated with the flash, so it doesn't have too much glaring in the patient's face or teeth. And they do that before. I don't do any of those. I simply pick up the camera and you can see it has the inside and outside flash. So automatically the flash will adjust itself and snap on, whether if it's a front or side, so I don't get the buccal corridors that are dark. So I don't get those dark buccal corridors that you see on a lot of those cameras that you take. So I get to see the entire arch, and the flash works for me automatically for the, and it's Wi-Fi connected. So I can simply take the picture and it pops up right on my computer screen with the Wi-Fi card that's already preloaded in the camera. So again, those of you who are into this type of before and afters and really want to show what works for your patients, we do a lot of surgery, we do a lot of implants, we do a lot of gum, and we call that the pinhole. So those of you who know camera and photography is important, because with just a simple little intraoral camera, it's not going to be enough. And again, you can disinfect it between each patient, so you don't have any cross contamination. And by the way, you can actually put it in the freezer. I've done this, and the camera will still work. Leave it in there for 10 minutes, 20 minutes, 30 minutes, bring it out, and the camera still works. I say that to you because the plastic around the camera is a special plastic that's been made. So you have preloaded for surgery mirror. It automatically flips the teeth. If it's a number 14 or 3, it'll automatically give you that mirror for intraoral photography, made easy. Sometimes you take an intraoral camera and take a picture of it, and number 14 is now number 3, and you kind of get confused. So this automatically flips it for you. The face module, the shade module that I use with my lab to show them the different shades for these patients. It's really easy to send an email to my patients as well, seeing their before and after as a little gift from us. So, I always want to talk about these types of processes in my practice, because a lot of doctors say, well, Dr. Ataii, we don't do what you do. Why not? I don't like spending too much money in my practice. Again, it goes hand in hand with economics of standard of care. This is part of my documentation. I need to show. So for me, a $2,000 or $3,000 spend is nothing compared to me having to go buy those huge SLR cameras that are made for weddings, and those cost me the same, and my team will never use it. They can never get that thing to focus properly, and they can't remember how to make it work again. This, you just pick up and shoot, done. And of course, It's much better than iPhone, just so you know. I know some of you say, I have my iPhone, it does the same. Well, there's a lot of HIPAA things that we won't get into at this point. So when you go to finishing and polishing, white stones are great. I love the Duro white stones. They're great for polishing, fine contouring, even finishing enamel composites, comprimers, and even porcelains. They're micro grain. They have aluminum oxide grit. They don't vibrate. So why I really like the Duro white stones is because of that vibration. I mean, take a look at and take any other white stone and run it over the filling you just done. If you have, some of you might have a scope, and look under and look at the micro fractures that are under there. So for me, the fine finishing on enamel, composites, glass ionomer, restoratives, and even porcelains are important. So when you start to get to this technology, for me, finishing and polishing is part of the entire process when you're doing those chairside type veneers, because I love to kind of do a little bit of enamelplasty. I love to kind of build the teeth up, as you can see, very quickly. But I need tools to get there, right? So for enamelplasty or even polishing some of these composites, I like the Super Snap that Shofu offers with the Duro stones, because now I have like the contouring that it has different color codeds from black, violet, green to pink, so I can contour, finish, polish, and even give a fine super polish where it looks like I just put a layer of shine on there. It allows me to have these finishes and buff the finish and polishing with the poly strips that can go in. And again, those are all color coded too, to have nice contours from the black, which is the coarse, to the medium grit, the violet, again, going to the green and red, pink color for that fine grit. So I really want to give you these tools, because when you start to look at the finishes, I always use the buffing discs to kind of buff them out. And these discs already have the paste impregnated with the aluminum oxide that is simply, you just wet it and it polishes that enamel work that you just did. Or those of you who do a lot of aligners, you want to remove an attachment. These are inexpensive ways of just super buffing the enamel, as well as your chairside direct restorations you put on. So when you start to look at what we talk about, the Ionomer technology, meaning you're talking about having a better choice, Bioactive technology, a company that is able to offer you not just products that are for composites or resin, but actually for finishes, diamond, burrs. I can tell you, name it all, that Shofu products make difficult dentistry easy. That's, if you can remember any of that, to me, just that word easy's I've been using over I'm going on 8 years now. The different products that this wonderful company has been able to give me to use, I've been able to use it again. And the Ionomer technology is not just bioactive, but also therapeutic, because of the benefits of the Ionomer technology that will last a lifetime for the restoration. Those are the two quotes you can quote me on, and I see some questions popping up. But before I take your questions, last time we talked about some do-it-yourself dentistry, and my kids that I talked to you about, one of them that had that chipped front tooth. Let me show you what they do to their teeth. And just to have a little fun, let me show you why I need this technology and why Ionomers are important, because this is what I have to deal with every day.
Stop.
So I'm gonna throw this football, and there's a floss attached to it, and the floss is attached to his tooth. So when I throw it, his tooth is gonna come out with it. Ready? 3, 2, stay right here. 1, throw it.
Yes, that's how they pull out their teeth. That's how they do this. You wonder why his front tooth is broken.
Where is it?
Where is it?
No. Show them. Bring it down. Bring the lip down. It's out.
All right. I thought you'd enjoy that. And I thought that you know why I need the best products in my practice, because I'm a believer in what I use. So with that, I'll go to your questions. And I really appreciate you spending this few minutes of learning about what we have in my practice. All right. Can self-adhesive composite be used as pit and fissure sealants in kids? Yeah, absolutely. So that fit essay that I showed you, Doc, I use that for my pit and fissure. So some of you don't want to etch, some of you don't want to bond, you know, the kid is moving around, they have a lot of saliva. You simply dry the surface and throw on that fit essay as a pit and fissure composite. And I did that for my kids. I'm now 3 years into it and I haven't seen any shrinkage and the teeth look great. LOL, the video was so funny. Thank you, Doc. The question about, okay, so understand, from the Shofu perspective, their product, all of their composite, all of their resins have Ionomer technology in them, all of them, and they have the bioactive material. However, it's important that the bonding agent has it as well, and they do. So they have a bonding agent, they have a composite, they have packable composite, they have injectable composite, and that fit essay, which I showed you, which is ideal for those class 5s or the PRRs or sealants for kids. That particular brand, the fit essay, you do not need to bond or have any kind of etching for that particular product. I hope that answers your question. All right. Well, I know that we are got another few more minutes to go. So if you have any other questions, ask away, and then I will at that point turn over to our host. One more question about. So when I do the chairside composite veneers, if you like to say, I don't like spending too much time on those. Isolation, like I said, I use just simple clear strips and some cotton rolls. Those are just simple. I etch. Those I do bond. In some cases, I sandblast, like you saw the last one. They had multiple layers of different types of composites, different timelines. So sometimes you actually have to take a diamond. And again, Shofu has different grits, diamond burrs that you can remove those areas. At that point, you can just isolate, sandblast. Now you can go etch, bond, and use the beauty fill. And that beauty fill, you have multiple shades, from the enamel shades to I saw it was an A.35, multiple different shades that I just simply it's the injectable composite, has the nanocrystals, has the Ionomer technology, and the polishing, which is beautiful, that I can easily polish. I put that on, I brush light layers on there with my brush, and I light cure. You can do that multiple times, and then you go to your final polishing of the different polishings that I saw. All right, thank you very much. And the video broke out giggling. Thank you very much, Doc. With that, I let you all go. And I thank you, Viva Learning, for being able to give me this few minutes to talk to you about the different product lines that Shofu has to offer. Thanks again.